to the InnerVerse. It's an illusion.
Welcome to the One Within All to the InnerVerse podcast. I'm your host, Chance, and with the wisdom-loving Sagittarian season in full swing, there is no better moment to take a break from all the holiday hustle and bustle to think outside of our social roles and attempt to contemplate some of the deep quandaries and quagmires of reason that have given philosophers over the centuries more confusion than a brood of muses hatching from the proverbial cosmic egg. Joining me today is a man that needs no introduction to the faithful listener, as you see him nearly every Wednesday night on Vibrant, but only rarely have we come together under the InnerVerse banner. If memory serves, we've only done it 3 times in total, and like the opening line of Plato's Timaeus, you may have been wondering, 1, 2, 3, but where, my dear Timaeus, is the 4th? Lovers of logos rejoice, for today's conversation is at least a few millennia in the making as we set out to uncover the core dialectic at the heart of all wisdom traditions and reveal the 2 lives that each of us have been living, a yin and yang of your deepest self, the twin pillars of philosophical and psychological being known as theory and praxis. Along the way, we'll discover the nature and necessity of esotericism more broadly, take a trip to the Callipolis of Plato's Republic, and peek under the hood of some of the ancient rhetorical strategies that have shaped our society, all while questioning, can perfect reason ever be applied to society? Is there hope for justice that fairly balances the individual against the collective? Are today's social engineers succeeding in their demolition of the 2 towers of self in the name of a non-existent and forging the ring of Gyges to invisibly rule over the wealth and freedoms of the individual in the name of a non-existent public good? So check out Slick Dissident on YouTube if you're somehow not yet subscribed, and dig into the show notes of this episode for links to Slick and all the ways you can support InnerVerse. And with that, as brief of an introduction as I could muster, it's time to man the psychic ramparts and update our dark arts defenses with the Lord of symbolic literacy and most flexible of mental martial artists, your friend and mine, Gabriel of the Great Whiteboard Brotherhood, aka Slick Dissident. Welcome back to InnerVerse, man. Yeah, buddy.
Give thanks and praise. Achilles himself couldn't ask for more finely winged words. That was a beautiful intro.
Thank you. I tried to fit it all in there, but I'm sure that, this is just a overflowing cup of possibilities. And I tried so hard to, maybe not in the normal style of an episode of InnerVerse, because I'm typically more interviewing and this will be more conversational. But I did my best to prepare material, and I realized there's no getting to the bottom of it. Not in a 2-hour conversation, not in 2,000 years of philosophical writing and thought. So we're just going to take a stab at it and maybe introduce these concepts and give them the old schizophrenic view. So where have you been, man? Anything you want to tell people at the beginning here, let them know about, or kind of open the subject in your own thinking?
Yeah, absolutely. It's so fascinating how our minds are constantly working parallel egregores at the same time. And when we touch base, it's like we were actually preparing for this conversation, whether we wanted to or not. We are so guided, Chance. We are so guided. In fact, I brushed off the Timaeus this morning. Yeah, I was locked and loaded for that. So just to bring people up to speed, with the Enneagram project on the Slick Dissident channel, I essentially laid the Enneagram onto Plato's Symposium. I found the 9 muses. I know them incredibly well. Chance recently dug in and he got the Symposium freshly on his mind. And so these aspects of relation to characters, which the Hebrews had no such word, or no, natures. The Greek word for natures, these are 9 natures, and Hebrews don't have that word. They had to use the word character. And right there, boom, I find these philosophers are occulting their nature. These characters in the Symposium are hiding their nature over their shoulder, like a little demonic spirit or a thought form or a techne, a muse of art. And so I've discovered the 9 muses who inform the speakers of the symposium, and I've taken it to a whole new level. And just a side detail, I also found that the 9 muses are correspondent to the Devis of the Navaratri. Navaratri is an anagram for the narrative. This is the greatest story that has ever been told, and the characters and the natures that are revealed here are quite rewarding. And I've taken the project to a whole nother level because my buddy Eric from the Great Whiteboard Brotherhood, big love and respect, he did some really deep digging on the 9 muses, and he finds powerful correspondences to the endocrine system. And this symposium never stops blossoming, never stops blooming with new, fresh, fractal perspective. And so I have now mapped the endocrine system onto the Enneagram system. And I'm checking my work against Robert Sapolsky, and I'm getting heavy, heavy reward for seeing the endocrine system and the Enneagram system as very correspondent to our internal anatomy. But then one thing to keep in mind, in Plato's Republic, they are constantly talking about the culture of the masses in a micro-macro paradigm, like a homunculus on the wall. And so they work the music of culture and social engineering, and then there is a inevitable byproduct onto the individual who takes in the arts, who goes through the vanguard. The vanguard is controlling how the music of your culture is operating. And so I now have the Enneagram and the endocrine right here, and we are looking at the most fascinating place where the rubber meets the road in the context of monkey see, monkey do. You know, Trump is hear no evil, Biden is see no evil, and RFK is speak no evil. Well, they are working the mass homunculus on the stage, and it's our responsibility to keep our side of the street clean and to not monkey see, monkey do as the big homunculus acts a fool.
Wow. Yeah, it's definitely the gift that keeps on giving, your work on the Enneagram. I've never seen anything like it. When you're talking about them as natures, it just begs me to bring up the Egyptian Ennead, whom they called those 9 gods Neter, which is the same word as nature. And when we're looking at the Enneagram as an overlay, we're talking about archetypes of personality or components of selfhood. And I think, I'm going to do my best to occasionally simplify some of the things that you're laying down for people that it might go over their head. And you correct me if I get my inferences wrong, but we're describing, and this is great that you're bringing this up because it establishes the value of our conversation today for the individual. We're describing the way that culture portrays archetypes and then influences the individual and their internal relationship to that archetype, thus shifting the Overton window of what is or isn't acceptable behavior, how the individual might act, which then goes back as a feedback loop to the collective, socially engineering the outcomes that the people who have their fingers on these particular archetypal levers of culture are able to establish. And hopefully it's not futile, to even try to bring this to light, because there's something about the divine, which is what this really is. This is the divine because it's the part that's universal and before, everything physical. These archetypal components of self, these 9 integers, they make up everything, but yet they're abstract and outside of the physicality of the construct. So I'm going to quote the Greek historian Strabo. where he says, secrecy induces reverence for the divine, since it imitates the nature of the divine, which is to avoid being perceived by our human senses. So, the question is going to be posed right out the gate, is the proper condition of higher knowledge to be hidden? Are we going against the grain by even trying to bring these things to light? I don't know. I'm not trying to fix anybody or save anybody or alter the world in any way apart from the way that it changes my world to have these kind of conversations with people like you, especially you. But these are, that's the jam, right? We're talking about like how social engineering really works.
Yeah, buddy. Yeah, man. And it is really fascinating when your internal journey with the divine harmonizes and reflects a deep truth within yourself in a really healing way. You all of a sudden you have words to describe an aspect of your story, and that's empowering. But what is creepy is when the world stage, the fugazi, the fiat, when the fiat starts to reflect some of the revelations you had within. That's creepy. That's creepy. And
that's the example of what I'm talking about.
Right.
The archetypes are not static. We're in conversation with them at all times. And each one of us has the ability to alter the expression of an archetype that ripples throughout the inner and outer world across the entire cosmos. It's actually quite wild. And, maybe that's why the French philosopher, I'm going to quote a lot of philosophers today.
Okay.
Diderot, he says, must one be senseless among the senseless? No, but one must be wise in secret.
There it is. There it is. Yes, oftentimes what is not said is the real signature of the wise, because they know it's would be pearls before swine in many ways. I want to share something regarding internal discovery, because it has to do with the last time we had PK on with the Great Whiteboard Brotherhood. We were talking about how the equinox in the fall is just over the shoulder of the Virgin. And a couple nights ago, some headlines were circulating that made me look to the heavens to see what the alignments were. And the moon was just over her ear, over the ear of the Virgin. It's right on the equinox line. It's X marks the spot. It was spot on the day. And I'm thinking about this because we were talking about it already before, Chance, how this location over the shoulder of the Virgin, I think, is cosmodramatically reanimated in our psyche through the egregores on the world stage that I do not consider natural. I consider that a break from nature. On the stage is away from nature. But this is reflecting the hostage situation. And I've actually trained in the hostage situation, which is a kind of broke a piece of my soul to pretend like I'm a sharpshooter and I'm going to save this. It was actually a dummy with a mustache and a wedding veil. We dressed up a dummy like a virgin, like a wedding, a wife on her wedding day. And then the bad guy, and this is all scenario-based training, he puts the dummy in a headlock and he's supposed to make mistakes. He takes his gun and he points it at the Virgin, and he is trained to make mistakes. He'll lift his elbow really high, and that's your cue. Boom, you take his elbow and the whole scene is fixed. But the shot that you take is just over the shoulder where the equinox line is. And it's just hit me that these cosmodramas that have psychologically altered me and my DNA when I was training in these things. And then you see it on film in Hollywood, and you're like, that is so lame. It's so lame to even consider taking that shot. And it's so the sympathetic magics of it is traumatizing.
Is it over the left shoulder?
It's over her left shoulder. Yep.
Dude, that's the spot in the biofield where the vulnerability to external energies is over the left shoulder, around the left armpit area.
I love what we draw upon. I love how much we draw upon. So I'm going back and I'm looking at Star Wars, specifically the moment when Princess Leia is being taken hostage and the bad guy uses her as a human shield. And I'm realizing that this is instilling this cosmodrama perfectly, but that they they even do this psychologically when they use Greta Thunberg on a stage. They're using this young virgin as a human shield, and you can't project animosity at her. You know what I mean? And it's completely, it's a new level of psychological effery that I think we need to warn the kids what's coming, because they're going to unpack these cosmodramas. But also Osama bin Laden. What happened when SEAL Team 6, when the SEAL Team 6 got Osama, he used his wife as a human shield. You know, whether that really happened or not, it doesn't matter. It's that externalizing of vulnerability, just like you said.
Yeah, it's the same thing as what I talked about last week with Moshe about the JQ. It's the art of creating immunity for the scapegoat, where they're simultaneously the scapegoat and yet immune to blame. And I think we actually see this move all the time. Like yesterday, Joe Biden pardons his son Hunter for all charges, who's been, the Bidens have been a big scapegoat, but the only one that could be targeted as such was Hunter.
Right.
But we don't need to spend too much time on that, but we see examples of this all the time. The granting of immunity to a scapegoat.
Yes. So if anybody cares to, I recommend looking up multiple definitions, both the generic and the Black's Law dictionary definitions of a misprision. I believe that all of elections are the largest form of misprision. And to the individual, misprision is described as helping somebody out even though you knew they broke the law. In a case where you should be reporting them to the law, you're obligated to report them, and you're turning up.
It's the deliberate concealment of one's knowledge of treason or felony.
That's it. That's it. And so every election is actually a competition for which larger form of homunculus misprision are you going to subscribe to. So when they say choosing the lesser of two evils, it's choosing the greater of two misprisions is really what's happening. And now the same thing is happening with Hunter Biden. They pack all this transgression into him like a scapegoat, and then they stash it away for a magical court date. And then when the court date comes, guess what? The stars are lined up perfect. The stars are lined up perfect for that court date when it pops off. Right now, the moon is under the knee of Ophiuchus and the sun is on the other knee of Ophiuchus. It doesn't get more scapegoat than this, y'all. And here's the other thing. We are essentially watching a ritualizing of the opening scene of the Iliad. The opening scene of the Iliad is hostage negotiations. Essentially, Agamemnon, who is number two personality, he's megalomaniacal, he's prideful, he's Luciferian. He is upset because of Chrysalis, I believe, has been killed by Apollo's disease, and he wants to steal Brisillus from Achilles. And Achilles is like, bro, you got it all twisted. He's about to pull his sword, and Athena comes and she grabs his hair and she yoinks him back. This is anatomically impeccable to the shape of Sagittarius. Sagittarius is getting jerked back, is torqued in a weird way. Sometimes if you look at the horse is even twisted and looking back over itself. And what is over the hair, what is just above the hair of Sagittarius is scutum, the shield of armor. Winged Athena is grabbing his hair and pulling him out of time. She actually, this is all adrenaline. Adrenaline takes you outside of time, and you can have conversations with the gods in a split second and reflect and redirect your endocrine system immediately. Check yourself, son. That's what she says. And then we go back to the scene, and it's like no time has passed. And his sword is almost out of the scabbard. He's like, okay, Athena said I could just talk smack instead. So he puts the scabbard back, and then he comes with his barbed words. That is happening right now, and it's supposed to happen at the handoff of the presidency every 4 years. This handing off of hostages, that is what we call pardons. Giving pardons to all the misprision nuggets that have been stored away for the magical time of year.
It's, again, this is another amazing way that we're like linked up without intending it, but you're talking about the sun and the moon on the knees of Ophiuchus that's hovering right over Scorpio. You're talking about Achilles basically having an internal conflict over whether or not to pull the sword or wield his tongue. And the very next thing I had lined up was this quote, in reference to the secrecy aspect of philosophy and higher knowledge that we're discussing today. This is Clement of Alexandria, and he says of Anacharsis, the Scythian, a 6th century BC philosopher. Clement says, while asleep, Anacharsis held his secret parts with the left hand and his mouth with his right, to intimate that both ought to be mastered, but that it was a greater thing to master the tongue than voluptuousness. And you see how that just applies to the Achilles scene that you just described, because the sword and the secret parts are very, very relatable. And it turned out that it was easier to master the sword and put that away than it was to stop himself from saying something, right? Talking smack.
Yes. Reticence.
And that's Scorpio, that's right there. The secret part's right there over Scorpio.
Yeah, man. I love the word reticence. That's a word that doesn't get thrown around much. Somebody told me once that Gabriel is like the shield arm of God. And they told me that it also means reticence. And I was like, ooh, that's cool. But I like algebra. Algebra is a good anagram out of Gabriel.
So I'm going to go through notes that I have. And as I'm just going to read one quote for now, but then, as we go forward and I'm reading stuff, feel free to jump in, because otherwise I might just kind of string stuff together. But we're going to introduce now this idea of philosophical esotericism as natural to the human condition. And this quote is from a guy named Arthur Mesler, and great book that I've been reading since I had that talk with Jack Kelly about the Atlantis puzzle.
Nice.
He put me onto this book, and I have a lot more to read in this book, but it's been a treasure trove of analysis of esoteric writing in the philosophical tradition, as good of one as I've ever come across, especially by a more modern writer. Now, this is from Melzer. He says, philosophical esotericism, which is the intentional concealment of one's true thoughts and meanings in their writing and in their rhetoric, in all its forms ultimately grows out of a single enduring problem of the human condition: the fact that we are not pure minds, the essential dualism of theory and praxis, of reason and its non-rational preconditions. In its philosophical use, the technique of esotericism, which is dualistic in its effort to send two messages at once, is an outgrowth of the essential dualism of human life. Big stuff here. So basically, he's talking about philosophical esotericism comes from the very fact that we're compartmentalized beings, that we are able to hide, we're able to do a thing and hide the reason that we did it from ourselves.
Yes. Pan-experientialism with functional duality and pan-experientialism is what the enneagram can be described as in Whiteheadian words. And it's that functional duality. This is what we're talking about with that there's two sides to all of these stations. And this is where your hypocrisy is the tithing that vice pays to virtue. And that is to say that every time I give people advice as a hypocrite, we're acting right now. We're putting our best foot forward, and every time I give advice out into the world, I'm also feeling like, oh man, I got to keep track of stuff I'm telling people to do for myself. You know what I mean? To keep up with my own high ideals. And that keeps you in check. I tell you what, it keeps you in check. So yeah, that's kind of
you should try being a energy healer.
Oh, dude. Yeah.
It's like nonstop.
Right.
Like, oh, okay. I'm equipped to tell you about what is going on because this is something I'm working on like every time.
Exactly. Yes. So that's kind of the fun that I have is that, sometimes I get going in lecture mode and then I'll catch myself and I'll be like, dude, who are you to lecture? Chill out, bro. Chill out. You know what I mean? But yeah, that is kind of the tithing that vice pays to virtue. I can't get enough of that, because I believe that when the stage of the engineers, that they actually expect that we call it looshing, but there's a better word. There's a we're getting supplemental catharsis. We're getting supplemental catharsis by the tithing that our vice is paying by watching the virtual stage. And so and that is how we sympathize a little too much to this. It's not a simulation. We're stuck in a stimulation. And so when we sympathize to these theatrics, we're getting a supplemental catharsis, but maybe and maybe not for your individual life experience, and that is part of the hyperdimensionality of these stories, that they're telling one signal to one type of person, but some other person watching this thing on the stage is getting a different message, and eventually they might clash on the chessboard.
That brings up such an interesting element to this, because to talk about what the problem of theory and praxis is in philosophy, it's essentially like, if we haven't made it clear enough, it's the question of whether or not perfect reason can be applied to society, to law. Like, is there such a thing as absolute justice that applies fairly and equally to everybody in the collective and also the individual? Can philosophy influence society in ways that improve society, or are society and philosophy, or basically truth and life, are they diametrically opposed? Can the scales ever be balanced evenly, or is there a built-in imbalance that is a part of nature? And it's interesting how artifacts of this question come through our language all the time. And one that I'd never caught on to before, and I think that you were just intentionally alluding to, is that the idea of virtue as a transcendent good that is pure and perfect is impossible. And, this is why people buy the idea of original sin so readily, because nobody that they know, and definitely not themselves, has ever had the expression of perfect virtue for any one of the virtues, on that enneagram. And so coming through into the idea of utopia, which is the, good place or no place, is, they say utopia means no place. It's because the very idea of the perfect society only exists in a virtual sense. And so we have virtual, which is artificial or fake, constructed, imaginary, what have you. And then that's springing right out of the same root as our word for virtue. That seems to be a clue.
I got something on that, buddy. So something that blows my mind is to find the bedrock of the church actually also being the bedrock of philosophy, right? These are the 7 deadly sins that you got to dig and dig and dig through the Republic, and you find out that they're also there's 9 remedial virtues. And I've discovered eudaimonia, and I'm rich beyond my own lifetime to have found eudaimonia through the enneagram. But what is amazing is that it is immortal, Chance. It was there for the Republic. It was there for the Bible. It's there for Nietzsche. It's here right now. It was there for the Davies. It was there for the Hindus. These virtues are alive and well. We just keep switching up what we call them and how we identify with them. So I will tell you that the virtues are RAF. They're real as a fart, but they blow in the wind as soon as you try to put your finger on them. They slip away. So yeah, I have eudaimonia. I got pandemonia. I got all the houses. I got the house of the demons. I got the house of the angels. They're all right here, but they're only for the individual to gain affluence with. You can't go to the theater to find out what to do with them. It's on you.
It's like, we know what justice smells like, but we can't actually find it in the room.
That's right. That's right. And in fact, there's a family heritage to that word that we in our community, because we have hermeneutics, because we value hermeneutics, we actually know the DNA of justice. And we know that its ancient grandfather was named Daikiosune. And we can bounce the word justice and Daikiosune off of each other. And what happened in this family lineage? And then Slick comes along and says, it's still here. It's decision, being discernment, having right choiceness is having discernment. Daikiosune is still here. We just call it something slightly different. And so your discernment is your justice. And that's the sword of Michael right there. I just handed it to you. Don't cut your toes off.
Yeah, I think DK is also TK, which is fortune, lady luck. You see the statues of the goddess of fortune or luck, and there's to the layman who didn't know what it was labeled by academia, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between a statue of Lady Luck and Lady Justice.
Right,
they're identical, blindfolded, holding scales, etc. But one is characterized by the dice, and the other is characterized by, the feather and the heart on the scale of Ma'at. But I think that that's kind of apropos, because with the hermetic, talking about hermeneutics, axiom that all truths are but half truths, maybe you would be just as well off being blindfolded when it came to trying to pass judgment upon, a court case where it's hearsay versus hearsay, which is because this is the entire problem of history. We don't know how to make a perfect future society because we don't even know what our past society was. We're stuck not knowing who we are now.
Yeah, man. Yeah. And just a couple of quick side notes, one theory that is only proven more and more correct in the overall arc of my works is that they want to put a one world court in District 9 of New York, Kings County, New York. This is checkmate. If they get this international court in Kings County, it's checkmate, and they are dropping anchors like crazy to get this to happen. And this has a great amount to do with the adjustment card that Crowley switched out. And the entire justice team that Chump just put together is fulfilling the plan to bring the one world court into Kings County, New York, District 9. But that is also the adjustment card is the card of Daikiosune and discernment and justice that we're talking about. But I want to say praxis. Think of the enneagram as your compass. Think of the enneagram as your praxis. And think of getting home to sleep at night and getting into bed and finally experiencing the tastiness of slothfulness is the goal every day, is to get home and get to bed. You wake up and
if you're in bed by 9, you're doing something right.
That's what's up. So yeah, in a really fascinating way, everybody walks through the Enneagram 1 through 9 on the micro, on the everyday, but then also on the macro in your life. So in a really fun way, that fact that the compass so Praxis is very close to the constellation that is the compass in the heavens. I got to say that so people can take the leap with me from Praxis to Pyxis, Pyxis is the compass in the heavens. And so I consider the Enneagram as my compass. And a really fun thing about sloth being the reward to honest day's work. Think about Chance how releging to come back together again. The word liege, it also has to do with leisure time and to be for life to slow down and for you to come back together again, to bring all your thoughts of the day and throw them in the amphora of your dream and go on an adventure to solve all the problems you may have regretted and then start over. So yeah, there's a releging around this number 9 in the aim of sloth, but then also, in the social engineers, that's something we resent about people in power is that they are lazy. They're lazy, and so in the strange way, they reflect the one thing we value. Getting home, go to bed, and get lazy. That sounds great, but that's all we see out of the people on high, like Joe Biden, the laziness of it. So yeah, that's just some of the ways that I see this as my praxis and my compass on the daily and on the annual.
So we're going to talk more about a subject called comparative rhetoric now.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah. Because I think we're making a really good case for the, or maybe not a case, but just describing the reality of esoteric communication from everything all the time. Like my point being, the entire canon of Western literature is riddled with esoteric meaning, which I was surprised to find out when reading this book by Mesler that modern academics actually reject the notion that there was a double or hidden meaning in the writings of the philosophers of old. Even though this guy has he created a website that compiles thousands of quotes of authors from the last 2,000 plus years where they're saying exactly that I never say what I mean and I never think what I say,
Totally.
Which is bizarre, but this is part of the overall thesis that we're trying to weave together here, which is coming to some conclusions about why would modern thought so completely and fully reject the idea of esotericism. And part of it has to do with just the way that we communicate and the way that we speak. And this is why I'm going to get into comparative rhetoric here, looking at how cultures other than Western cultures communicate. And if, to set it up, if it's the case that no matter how direct I am and how precise my words that I'm trying to transmit some kind of understanding to you through, it's hopeless that anything other than you taking it the way that you would take it will happen. This is a big part of rhetoric. It's in the Phaedrus. Socrates talks about this, that there's two categories of speech. There are the things that you can say that everybody is going to identify the exact meaning of identically. And there's things that you can say that no matter what, everyone's going to take it their own way. And wielding those two aspects of speech intentionally is critical for good rhetoric, for persuasive rhetoric. But I think that we've come to a point in history where there isn't the universal, unequivocal, ubiquitous meaning in just about any word at all, period. I think
that's profound.
I think we've crossed that threshold personally.
It's like permanent both-anding.
So we're going to talk about some discoveries from sociological studies of intercultural communication, and the two basic styles of communication being direct and indirect, which are characterized by the Western versus the Eastern parts of the world. Not just perfectly, there is no such thing as a perfect division of West and East, but you know what I mean when I say Western. And then there's maybe more developing nations or even primitive civilizations that we're going to put into the indirect category. So another way of describing this is the way that anthropologist Edward Hall distinguishes low context societies versus high context. So the United States and Europe, we would be we'd be low context societies. And that comprises all of the developed world, more or less. But the entire rest of the world, pretty much, is a high context style of communication. So what low context communication means is it's characterized by the expectation that we are going to be direct, clear, explicit, concrete, linear, and we're making a point. Just feel free to jump in at any point here.
Very Apollonian.
Yeah. It's Dionysian versus Apollonian. That's a good way, or it's feminine and masculine. So the direct communication is the attempt to be masculine in a sense, in the communication style. It's penetrative. I'm trying to take an idea and penetrate it into your mind, in its exact form. It's seeding of ideas. So this is interesting that this comes from the field manual for the Peace Corps, the cross-cultural workbook of the Peace Corps. That should ring bells. Just so it says of Westerners that people say what they mean and they mean what they say. You don't need to read between the lines. It's important for them to tell it like it is, and honesty is the best policy. So that's the low context. The high context way of speaking or writing is the exact opposite, as you would think. Explicit language is considered in many cases to be shallow or even rude. So it's expected that one should, this is again from the field manual from the Peace Corps, one should approach one's subject in a thoughtfully indirect, suggestive, and circumlocucious manner. People are indirect. They imply or suggest what they mean. Understatement is valued, and you need to read between the lines. So this is something that for many of you has probably never even crossed your mind. It's hard to even fathom for Westerners. I have a hard time imagining how to speak this way. I think you are in this mode pretty often, actually. I don't know how you got there, but the two of us are kind of representing this dialectic just when we do shows together. When you say something very arcane and esoteric, and then I try to translate it into like a soundbite package of one sentence.
That is so right. That is so right.
It's kind of like yin or yang. It's kind of like masculine or feminine. And a good simplification, again, to be direct, is it's exactly the difference between this direct and indirect style of communication is exactly what I think all men can relate to, of learning to read between the lines when their woman says, "Do you think it's cold in here?" Which really means, "I want you to bring me a blanket." And when you're like, "Yeah, it's kind of cold," or "No, I'm not cold," you've just failed the test.
Yes.
And I'm always just like to Jen, just tell me what to do and I'll do it.
Totally.
That's what we want.
Yes. So often for me, when I have an epiphany, I can feel the weight of it right away. And part of the weight of this new thought form is that I know the context is coming. I know it's going to take me at least a week for all the context of this truth to prove out in hindsight. And so I love that the difference here is high context or low context. And, a great many times, especially in the Great Whiteboard Brotherhood, I'll just start rambling and free spitballing on some thoughts. And I kind of assume that people have read everything I've read and that they're drawing on the same, library that I'm drawing upon. And so I'm going back to get to be with text. I have to go get the book that I drew that conclusion upon. And then I have to tell everybody, okay, this is why I thought that, and so, it is very, I think that this might be Chance. I think you might be laying out that the dividing line between analytic and continental philosophy. And it's not a one-to-one, but it harmonizes powerfully with the way I see it. And essentially, analytic philosophy will not suffer a contradiction. It is allergic to poetic speech. It's very Socratic. It is a glutton for questions. Very number 7, this analytic is so born out of the scientific method, and Socrates is the mystagogue of science. And then I see the continental philosophy as more of a number 2, but very potent with metaphor and flowery speech, and even drawing on your taste buds. And continental philosophy knows that you have ears in your feet. We all have ears in our feet. Did you ever know that? Yeah, you all have ears in your feet. And I bet you wish you knew that before the hook that was so sandy came along. Right? And so this poetic, flowery speech is hiding out in art, and it undermines the shoal. In analytic philosophy, you are in shallow waters. You are in a shoal. And there is an art to fishing the shoal of what the conch shows you noise. When I do these poetic, flowery embellishments on what you
consciousness, and it's the conscious mind and the unconscious.
Exactly.
All of these philosophical dialectics are the same dialectic in expressing in different zones of our awareness.
Correct. And there is a entire famine for metaphor in the analytic camp. There's a famine for metaphor. They're even kind of allergic to it. Like you were saying, when the one type of context is insulted by directness, that's actually an insult to be direct. And if you don't show a little je ne sais quoi, then you clearly aren't getting the game here. And that je ne sais quoi is in the continental camp. And so constantly I'm telling people, like, don't you realize that climb bitch agony is encoding Pandora? And that's because I'm from the continental camp. I know the hermeneutics. I know the hermeneutics that go all the way through the mythology that are the foundation and bedrock of making an economy out of a big mech bot named Talos. And then when Talos collapses, I know the whole story. And they're just repackaging these stories and putting them in fancy packaging. And everybody takes their words for granted. They're self-canceling trite cliches that they think are consciousness. But I'm telling you, it is shallow waters. And it is from the continental artistic side that they are pulling our strings in vast ways. And we know this because we have the hermeneutics. We adhere to the hermeneutics, and we appreciate that we have ears in our feet and taste buds in our other body parts. It's a little bit synthesia. You know, there's a little bit of synthesia that is the context that people are missing to come through the continental camp of philosophy. Yeah. So there's some missing context, I think, that might enrich people and also help people understand why other people seem so dense, you know, philosophically, because they just are not even aware that there's a whole nother paradigm. And if you study the difference between continental and analytic, they say that these two worldviews don't see each other. Can I tell the story that Polly told us about the devil walking between the two guys?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
I got some more to say about these
Okay.
Indirect ways of speaking, but
okay. So big ups to Polymath, and he's going to try to dig this story out. I think it's from Africa that Joseph Campbell put out there. And it's a story about one day the devil was going to go and get up to no good. And so he put on a hat that was blue on one side and red on the other side. And then he put a corncob pipe sticking out of the back of his scarf. And he walked down between two fields where two workers were toiling in the field, like the minor arcana. And as he walks by, he says, "Hey, hope you're having a good day. See you soon." And he keeps on walking by. And the two farmers at the same time turned around and they both assumed that he was talking to them. And they're like, "Okay, yeah, see you soon." He's like, "No, he was talking to me. No, he's talking to me." "Why do you think he was walking backwards?" "He wasn't walking backwards. He was walking into town." Well, that's so weird. And then they start arguing over whether he was wearing red or blue. And then the funny thing is, the devil comes back and he walks the opposite direction and does the same thing the second time. And the real kicker is that now the person with the opposite context is saying what you were saying before. And you just saw the exact opposite. So the two farmers start fighting over each other. And this is and there's a lot of lessons in that. But one lesson I was thinking about is kindness is free. Hey, how you doing? Have a good day. That's free, you know? And so the devil is operating in kindness. But to argument and try to get somebody else to bear witness for you, to impose your witness onto somebody else's purview, that's costly. That is really costly. And so I think the lesson is that kindness is free, but to expect someone else to bear witness for you can cost you a great deal.
Wow, that's a profound reading of that, and it fits perfectly into where I'm going. It's very costly indeed. We're going to get there. We're going to translate that even further. But let's get back into the indirect style of communication. So describing the various primitive and pre-literate societies of Asia and Africa in a book called An Anthropology of Indirect Communication, the authors give the reasons they inferred for this high context indirect style of speaking to be to avoid giving offense, or on the contrary, to give offense, but with relative impunity, to mitigate embarrassment and save face, to entertain through the manipulation of disguise for aesthetic pleasure, to maintain harmonious social relations, to establish relative social status, to exclude from a discourse those not familiar with the conventions of its usage, and thereby to strengthen the solidarity of those who are. So that last bit is really important, because think about when cooties was on and lockdowns were popping off. Think about how strong of an energy there was to the solidarity of all of us on Telegram and, in the podcast circuit where we're slinging truth on YouTube and we're using code words and we're we were empowered by it. I'm reflecting now from this point on the way things feel different from now to then. And it's almost like now that it's all in the public, all this is kind of more openly known, and we're no longer being shamed for showing our faces in public or getting the opportunity to do this like renegade shit that it's like kind of like some of the air gets let out of our balloon. And Owen Benjamin actually has some really funny rhetoric about this in context to the gays, that now that they're like allowed in society and you can buy their t-shirts at Target, they're like, it's not fun for them anymore, that they got a lot of juice out of being this like secret coven, getting away with stuff behind the scenes. That this may be part of the reason for secret societies' secrecy in the first place, that there is power in that which is unsaid. And I'm going to return to that. But there's a lot of power in that which is hidden and unsaid. We'll just, because it stays in the realm of potential, you could say.
Right. That just hit me hard, reflecting on the symposium and some of the hunches that I had the first time I read it. I'm finding evidence that supports my hunch. And that makes it more powerful because it wasn't said, it wasn't laid out explicitly. And, my sneaking suspicion is like, has a life of its own. But yeah, there is a lot to that. And
the
then
discovery, there's like juice in the discovery.
Right. Yeah. And then I just wanted to mention how this high context rhetoric can be used to avoid offense or inversely to deliver offense tactically. I just think of what we are calling military grade irony. And I think military grade irony is Socrates' main jam, especially Xenophon's Socrates, even more than Plato's. But I'm thinking of military grade irony is a fencing lesson, and it's testing your threshold for insult.
It's made of the same thing a sword's made out of.
It is. And
very Martian.
I think that's a little nugget people can kind of till through their soils on their own, but irony as a test for your threshold of insult. And the more intelligent you are, the more context you have, the more insulted you will be at this slip under the radar that nobody else sees. So,
occult mockery that we see in all kinds of places. I mean,
yeah, man.
Mark Passio used to go on about that when decoding stuff like 9/11. Like there's occult mockery.
Totally. Even like the official way to test if something is dead still is you poke it and see if it goes away. And if you poke it again and it doesn't go away, if you poke it a couple times and it doesn't retreat or recoil, it's probably dead. That's still how you test the dead.
I think that there is a real power in occult mockery to diminish a being, to harm a being. I just always come back to the example of back to lockdowns again, when people are in the streets holding up signs that say, "I can't breathe," and they're wearing a mask. But in their mind, the two things are not related. Like that is the most powerful, not even really a cult. I mean, it's just mockery, but irony, weaponized irony for sure.
Weaponized irony. One of my favorites is, "This is not a conspiracy. We're all in this together. This is not a conspiracy. We're all in this together." Woo! But it's not a conspiracy.
Well,
but
what makes it weaponized is, in my experience working in people's biofield, which at this point I've got a lot of it, every time that I uncover distinct and dramatic physiological dysfunction, something aberrant in the body's expression or abilities, there's always cognitive dissonance there. Two ideas that directly contradict one another being held as true by the person in the same part of their energy field simultaneously. Always.
Yeah, man. Yes.
It literally harms the body.
Yeah. And this is where I have to check myself. some of my hypocrisy comes through in my bias against analytic philosophy. I have to really check myself because maybe I'm being a little envious. Maybe I'm kind of like Cypher, where I wish I could go back to sleep and not see all the context and not perceive the mockery. There is an aspect of me that wishes I had a shallow waters and I didn't know these things, you know? Oh, hold on. I had a point.
Let me read some stuff about Chinese indirect communication.
Okay, and I'll try to remember what it was that. Yeah, eventually you just kind of wish you weren't though, and it's your burden to tell people the joke. You're like, I'm sorry to tell you, but you got screwed again. All right, go ahead.
Okay, because this is gonna blow your mind. All right, like some of the quotes I'm gonna get to. So I'm gonna go through a lot at once just for the sake of time. So Chinese culture actually has a word for what they call implicit communication, or in English, it would be implicit communication. It's Han Shu, which is speech that is contained, reserved, implicit, and indirect. And according to communications scholars Gay Gao and Stella Ting Toomey, Han Shu, which is HANXU in English, is considered a social rule in Chinese culture. According to the rules of Han Shu, one does not spell out everything, but leaves the unspoken to the listeners. The ability to surmise and decipher hidden meanings is highly desirable in Chinese culture. They go on to say, when the Chinese vaguely express an idea, an opinion, or a suggestion, they expect their conversational partner to be highly involved and to take an active role in deciphering messages. A hesitant and indirect approach serves to grant the listener an equal footing with the speaker in conversation. Now, going on about this, Mesler, of this Philosophy Between the Lines book, he says, opposite to our Western expectations, ambiguity draws the listeners in. It heightens their involvement, making them complicit in what is being said. An esoteric style, although its most obvious use is as a means for excluding unwanted listeners, its defensive and protective roles, also functions as a means of inclusion, tightening the bond between speaker and hearer, writer and reader, its pedagogical role. Moreover, this indirect style is practiced not only in polite conversation, but also in matters of the greatest importance. Get ready. Henry Kissinger, recounting in his memoirs the momentous negotiations for the opening to China, was quite struck by Mao's elliptical mode of communication. This is a direct quote from Henry Kissinger about Mao. His meaning emerged from a Socratic dialogue that he guided effortlessly and with deceptive casualness. The cumulative effect was that his key points were enveloped in so many tangential phrases that they communicated a meaning while evading a commitment. Mao's elliptical phrases were passing shadows on a wall. They reflected a reality, but they did not encompass it.
Bro, that's Kissinger on Mao?
Yeah. Direct quote from Kissinger.
Goodness. Oh my goodness. See, this is why Xenophon Socrates is better, because he's Persian. He's come because Xenophon went to Persia.
I'm actually going to get into the Arab version of this next.
Wow, y'all. Wow. That's so heavy duty. That's so heavy duty.
Well, if a guy like Kissinger is hip to this,
yep.
You think that this isn't military grade irony being put into place in the West?
Yeah, man.
It's just, do you think that it's the leaders and social engineers are in this one mode of consciousness that is the direct low context style that all of us tend to operate in? Or do you think that we're being made complicit through the seeding of all this meaning in the symbolism of Hollywood and of media ritual events? We're being made, like, it was very clear, Mesler says it very clearly. You're being made complicit in what's being said.
So one thing that I've discovered, and I think it's I have to say it because we're talking about Kissinger and Mao. The second muse is Cleo, and on her lap is the scroll that is the battle strategy of Thucydides' History of the Peloponnesian War. And there's codes inside of codes inside of codes for days in that fact. and on the cover. But in the Thucydides history of the Peloponnesian War is the Mylene dialogues, which is the basis of the Thelemic oath. Love under will under my butt, all that. That's the Mylene dialogues, can be summarized in one sentence. The strong do what they will, and the weak do what they must. And the word Mylene dialogues is an anagram for the moon landing. Also, in Thucydides' history of the Peloponnesian War is what is a prophecy from this far back. However far the Republic goes, I'm stuck on kind of 1300s. I'm not going past BC anything. I'm thinking a lot of these prophecies are actually only sustained barely since before the printing press that we got from Asia. We stole that technique from Asia. They had it way before us. Anyway. In Thucydides' history of the Peloponnesian War is the preservation of what is called Thucydides Trap. And Thucydides Trap is the foresaging of the battle between Asia and the hegemon. And so this prophecy in her lap is coming true right before our eyes right now. It is so pertinent. So yeah, what you just said is fascinating because the number 2 is 100 is Pausanias. He's sitting exactly across from Socrates here. And it's almost like Henry Kissinger's account of Mao is like Cleo looking across at Calliope. I'm just seeing these muses and their relationships fulfilling what is, the chessboard that they see and want and expect.
It's like traps within traps because on the surface, so Thucydides Trap is the political theory that an emerging power will always threaten the dominant and established power, and there's an inevitability of war. So on the surface, we're given, this goes perfectly with China and Kissinger, we're shown that China is the trap, the inevitability. But the real rising power is in the individual. It's always the individual and the state that are in this Thucydides trap. Mm-hmm. And it's the shadows on the wall are the nations of the world. And that's why it's perfect that in the second part, we're going to talk about Plato's Republic more and really dig further into this theory and praxis idea.
Yeah. I want to point out that some context for this, the provenance of this thought form coming from the lap of Cleo, the muse of history. Everybody has communed upon. You fell for one of the classic blunders, one of which is never getting a land war with Asia, and only second, lesser known, is never go in against a Sicilian when death is on the line. So yeah, that's where Thucydides Trap was preserved and sustained and nodded to the inside click. Interesting that he was Sicilian. That might be the Italian toes. That might be the Italian toes that is Atlantis that everybody's buzzing on.
And I'll just wrap up this comparative rhetoric part because I did have a little bit more to say about Arab cultural preferences, which is again, and this is according to R.S. Zaharna in Understanding Cultural Preferences of Arab Communication Patterns, where he says that they prefer indirect, vague, and ambiguous statements with the burden of understanding falling not on the speaker speaking clearly, but on the listener deciphering the hidden clues. In fact, the better the speaker, the more skillful he may be in manipulating the subtlety of the clues. The Arab audience, which is participatory, delights in finding these hidden clues. The foreign correspondent David Slackman finds that Americans and Iranians speak 2 different languages. Americans are pragmatists, and word choice is often based on the shortest route from here to there. Iranians are poets and tend to use language as though it were paint, to be spread out, blended, swirled. Thus, in Iran, you have to guess if people are sincere. You're never sure, said Nasser Hadian, a political science professor at the University of Tehran. Going on, he says, symbolism and vagueness are inherent in our language. Speech has a different function than it does in the West, said another social scientist, Kian Tajbakhsh, a social scientist who lived for many years in England and the United States before returning to Iran. Going on, he says, in the West, 80% of language is denotive. In Iran, 80% is connotative. It's a huge difference.
Wow.
Listeners are expected to understand that words don't necessarily mean exactly what they mean. This creates a rich, poetic, linguistic culture where people are adept at picking up on nuances. So I want to just bring this, as we're closing out the first hour, into a real critique of the way that we operate. I'm not saying I know the best way to be, but this idea of honesty is the best policy, it seems so natural and right to us to just be direct and clear with what we mean. But oddly enough, when we have this sort of internal focus and emphasis on this more yang or masculine style of operating in the world, we get the inevitable emergence of our shadow, which is the repressed, secretive nature of ourself in society. And now somehow simultaneous to this, expression of directness and truthfulness emerges the open society, which is no privacy. Secrecy and reserve and privacy are fundamentally suspect by, the majority and the masses. And it's like this liberal democratic openness where the highest value is put on what is disclosed in public and made available to everybody, that everything should be free. There's going to be the majority of listeners to this are not going to go past the first hour for $8 because they think that it should be free. And this is a bruise on our psyche that comes from this imbalance in the way that we communicate and the way that we think. And, we think politics should be transparent. We think academia, the only value as an academic is in publication. And our personal lives are less and less personal, less and less secret. There's like this bizarre therapeutic impulse to confess or exhibit everything online that we do, as if there's some strange power of healing in putting all of our dirty laundry on the internet. Just why I don't get on Facebook, because half or more than half of the posts are like, this is why I'm sad and depressed, or this is what I hate, or whatever. And it's gotten to the point where most of us see no legitimate alternative to this. And when we look at other civilizations, or potentially, from the perspective I'm trying to get at, maybe a more balanced way of being, you hear about people's family where like, I hear this kind of thing in tuning all the time. Like, yeah, my dad, he had a hard life because his mom never told him that she loved him even once. And that's hard for us to comprehend, as if that's like evil. But in other societies right now, India, Japan, husbands, wives, parents, children, they can go their entire life without ever saying openly, I love you to one another. And we see that and we're horrified, like what monsters they must be. But if we're so focused on the saying of the thing as if it establishes as a fact, does that take away from the nuance of doing things that express? This is, again, the difference between doing and being. We're coming back to the very core dialectic. Is it more valuable to say a thing or for it to be expressed through our behavior? What's more loving? Taking care of someone, treating them with respect, or just telling them I love you as if that's a Band-Aid on all of the bad shit you've ever done or all the ways you weren't there for them. You see what I mean? And I think that we can be in the middle here. But for a lot of people, it's like, as long as I said the right thing, I'm exempt from all my behaviors. Well, I said I'm sorry. Ask for forgiveness, not permission, all of that. So this is the very real societal issues that are emergent from the direct and non-direct style of communication, and being too far imbalanced on one side of this. We're missing all of the other context.
Man, such a good weave, buddy. Such a great weave. Help me correct myself. The open society is a Karl Popper branch, I believe. And Karl Popper and Wittgenstein. Yes. Okay. This is a crucial deviation point, and I'm glad we're putting it out and not missing this detail.
And George
Victim-
Soros is the founder of the Open Society Foundation, or
Yes.
Institute, or whatever.
Yes, and I want to kind of get wax poetic on the open society, and I believe that your opinion, expressing your opinion openly in this society, is actually making you sleepy, and it's making other people sleepy because of a false vitriol from making mouth noises at the big bad wolf. So opinion, open society, and even opium. You know, we get all of our opinion out and we feel like we took care of something because we make mouth noises at the big bad wolf. So the open society, I think, has a great deal to do with spell population in reverse. No ITAL loop op is telling you you can scream wolf all you want. The people are going to go to sleep anyways. So yes, this open society of Soros is part of the Thucydides Trap, y'all. And then the opposite side of that is Wittgenstein. Now, be careful. This is not a coin. It's not Karl Popper and Wittgenstein. It's not like that. Wittgenstein has an early philosophy and a late philosophy. I think his late philosophy was trying to put stopgap measures in what he saw the Vienna Circle doing with his early work. So as soon as you say Wittgenstein, you are dancing in nuance like never before. And then I know we're not doing any graphics on this one, Chance, but a very large weave that I just served up in 2 minutes and breezed on by without fulfilling much of what needs to be fulfilled on this idea is that House from the series House is a reincarnated avatar of Wittgenstein himself. And Wittgenstein is the nemesis character from the social engineer's standpoint. But I just want to read something that I threw together. If you just look at Wittgenstein and you look at House, they've totally reanimated this very stoic. He was kind of an asshole. There's no way around that. He was a real asshole, but he was not wrong. That's the other thing. It sucks because he was always right. And if you think about House, his character is the same way. You don't like him, but you need him. But you need him anyways.
If people want to look up Wittgenstein, it's actually spelled Wittgen Stein.
That's it. That's it.
So you might have trouble Googling that otherwise.
Yeah. So I sent you this graphic a couple of days ago, but I just want to read my explanation for what I think they're doing. I think they are fabricating reincarnation cycles in egregoric avatars with the telos of commoditizing pathologized demand for a higher standard. You guys might want to write down what I just said and reflect back on it and chew on it a little bit, because sometimes these words are so full of context, it's amazing. They are commoditizing the pathologizing of a demand for a higher standard. That is to say, they're finding ways to make big dollars on making you sick if you get angry. If you get angry about this, you are pathologized and they're going to lock you away. And this even temperament spell is dialed up to the max right now. So I think everybody should actually get angry. We should all get angry, and we should be like the Incredible Hulk and Bruce Banner when he integrates with himself. My secret is I'm always angry. I'm always angry.
Yeah, anger is the polarity of desire. When you repress your anger, you don't even know what you want anymore.
Yeah, buddy.
And then you're more than willing to let somebody tell you what's good for you. When I'm talking about this, you know, the Apollonian Western society, where it's just the light and what is conscious and direct and truthful that is considered permitted in society, then its very nature creates the repression of these so-called negative emotional states, or, you know, things that are legitimate elements of your psyche. Legitimate. Totally. They're completely legitimate. They have a purpose. They're healthy. Yeah. Well, we got to cut off the free hour at some point. We're going to get into theory and praxis more fully and use Plato's Republic as the bellwether for whether or not we're able to create a perfectly just society or something even approximating justice, or just what the hell is justice? Is there such a thing to begin with? It's big. We got a lot of ground to cover. And I think this first segment was really good, exceeded my expectations. I think we hit the notes that we needed to hit. I think that there's value here for, and my only question is like, how do I learn to speak between the lines? Maybe learning to read between the lines is the first step. So I'm working on that. It's going to be a lot of deprogramming to balance out this Apollonian tendency, but I think we can do it. I think we can get there. And I got you for a Sensei Slick in the house. Anything you want to tell people about as we're closing off part one?
Not a whole lot going on the Slick channel. I've been kind of on a roll recently. Some really fun analysis on Star Wars has come across my radar. I took a little gallivant into the circle of philosophers that might be getting hailed in what I consider the modern day epic. I think the original Star Wars is just like Milton's Paradise Lost. It's the kind of thing that they plan to unpack for generations. I've been unpacking that on my channel, but that's about it. Come over, check me out. I'm almost at 4,000. I'm at 3.96. 396 total enneagram number. But yeah, come on over, y'all.
Very nice. Thanks for being with me, buddy. Looking forward to part two.
Big love.
All right, you guys made it to the end. Thanks for being here for the whole show. Really enjoyed this hangout with Gabe. I mean, I hang out with Gabe all the time. He's like one of the best friends I ever had in my life, which is a little weird because we don't even live in the same state. But whenever the type of thoughts are rattling through my old brain, like we got into today, there's very few people, philosophically speaking, that I would want to mirror with than Gabriel, more than Gabriel. Great guy. Definitely check out Slick Dissident on YouTube and enjoy trying to derive meaning out of his esoteric, schizophrenic style. I think that this conversation, even though it was like maybe even more dominated by me in terms of airtime of who's talking, hopefully maybe justified the way that Slick operates a little bit. I particularly enjoyed in the first hour talking about the low context, high context society, but all of that stuff was really just set up for part two, where we get into the philosopher as a fundamentally different sort of human being, the turning around of the soul necessary, and how the philosopher king, a la Plato's Republic, is the ultimate bad job, as in communism. And we talked about how esotericism insulates politics from philosophy, and the anti-tragic, progressive humanism that rejects esotericism and defines our modern societal worldview. We described Mercurial poiesis, or making, as the balancing point between theory and praxis, the noble lie of Plato's Republic, and how social justice is the modern version of the noble lie. All that and a lot more. I think we probably clocked in part two, maybe an hour and 10 minutes or something. Maybe not quite that long, but either way, definitely a chunky show for you, especially the free half going a bit over. And I encourage people, if they do want that second part where we really get to the meat of the matter and maybe even wrap our minds around comprehending why this whole social justice thing has emerged and is still alive, and how it functions as the pillar that our society, or the bedrock that our society currently is built on. It's more of an expression of something that was already there. But you can get all that on my Patreon or my YouTube channel membership or my Rockfin. Those are your choices. And I appreciate everybody that chooses to support me. And particularly, this episode was highly charged and inspired by my own recent research. And some of the things that reading this book right here, Philosophy Between the Lines by Arthur Melzer, had inspired me to look into further, as well as my own digging into Plato. the Republic, the Symposium, the Phaedrus, etc. And, make up your own mind about this stuff. That's kind of the point, is that esotericism protects the author from being pinned down to any specific meaning, except for by the people that we're never going to understand anyway. And for them, he's got a very specific exoteric meaning. I like that. It's been something that this book has helped me wrap my mind around, like why esotericism exists, the benefits of it, the virtues of it. And it's difficult for us to comprehend in this very Apollonian truth-oriented, tell it like it is type of society. But I think particularly we landed in some places of deeper understanding of other ways of operating culturally, like that aspect of Eastern cultures that don't say I love you to each other. I think a lot of us have had the experience in relationship where there's a lot of gravity on that moment of first saying the L word. And maybe as my wife said it, that her instincts earlier in life were that if you say it too much, it will be devalued by the repetition. There could be something to that. There seems to be a power in secrecy, a power in occulting things. And maybe we've got to the bottom of it, maybe not, but I'm glad we opened this can of worms with the great Gabriel. Definitely go follow Slick Dissident on YouTube. Check out the show description for ways that you can support InnerVerse as well. Lotus Way, Typical New Herbs, getting yourself set up with a biofield toning session. There's a lot of, speaking of power and that which is hidden, there's quite a lot of personal power, energy, and vitality that can be liberated from the hidden parts of your psyche. If you're interested in finding out more, go to the sound healing page on my website. There's tons of resources there. You can learn about the method. You can learn about the biofield anatomy and even do yourself some good just by using that. As a father, I've really enjoyed having the knowledge of the biofield anatomy, even just in the first couple months of our daughter's life. Because as I talked about with Moshe, our daughter started out with a tongue tie, which meant her ability to get satisfied while nursing was compromised, and that there was a buildup of frustration energy out of that. And after we released the tongue tie, I started doing it before because I was trying to keep up, but there was definitely a period of days where I was using the sonic slider, the weighted tuning fork, and also a 417 hertz fork, audible fork, to help encourage the expression of that backlog of frustrated energy and bringing it back to, a place of balance. And I could tell that it was there because the baby's belly was really hard, and that's kind of the natural pendulum swing of when you're not satisfied, then you'll overindulge, right? And once she had got the tongue tie fixed, I think she was really, I know it, there were several days there where she's still a little bit this way. I think there may be still more work to do, but she's really attached to the breastfeeding, maybe overdoing it, getting over full. That's kind of the thing that happens is the, overcompensating for dissatisfaction or frustrated energy. But a lot of people do that through overeating, The baby can't regulate that for themselves, but working with sound to help chill out that frustrated energy has helped our daughter come to a place of being a lot more happy and satisfied and not in that quick to upset place. I'm making it sound like she was tough, but it would be tough to have a tongue tie and not be able to get enough nutrition. So learn about the biofield anatomy, apply that to parenting. You might be surprised the ways that can help you to cut off particular adaptations and difficult types of conditioning before they really set in. I'm still early in the process, so I'll keep you updated, but I think that it's really helped because, with the hard tummy, when I put the weighted fork on it, the thing that would happen after that would be huge releases of gas or a bowel movement, and then baby feels better. So you can use this stuff, sound, frequency, biofield anatomy, without even a lot of knowledge or practice. You can put that theory into practice. But if you want some help, I'm good for that too. I can give you guys an accelerated liberation of stuck psychic energy. And I think it's great. We've got a lot of awesome clients that attest to that. One guy, I'm going to read an email from Pedro, where he had just been emailing me about his glasses bothering him. And then we had done a tuning session. And I was like, hey, maybe, because we'd worked on the third eye, I was like, maybe you don't really need the glasses, but your eyesight was struggling because of, and he had mental acuity issues going on too, because of stuck third eye energy. And he emails me back, wow, Chance, it's amazing. You were right. My eyesight improved tremendously. I haven't used my glasses for a week and I seem to see very well without them. It's also a bit surprising, and my body is still adapting to that reality, I think, reversing the adaptations. So, wow, that was one tuning. Now, I'm not saying that it's like the magic bullet that fixes everything all at once, but there are legitimate, cool results. And he's not the first person that had eyesight improvement from a tuning. Anyway, I'm going on and on about it, but just would love to see more of you guys that haven't tried it out. Get on my calendar. So InnerVersePodcast.com, sound-healing, or just email me, chance@InnerVersePodcast.com with any questions. And with that, been talking for 10 minutes. I think there's enough meat on them bones for this episode to be one for the archives that will be good in perpetuity. I'm going to be pondering this philosophical dialectic for the rest of my life, and I hope that I've implanted some seeds for you guys too. I love talking to y'all. Peace. Be good. Bye-bye.